day, good evening to everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar, which is titled Making the Law Listen, the ICJ Advisory Opinion on Climate Change and the Power of Activism. And it was just about a month ago, around this time when we had all finished taking in the public listening of the ICJ's advisory opinion on climate change, which is a third of its kind in the series of advisory opinions on issues relating to climate change. And you may know, you may not know, you may have joined other webinars that have discussed the issue, particularly the legal aspects of the advisory opinion. But today we want to do something a little different. There'll be more time, I guess, for more webinars about the legal issues arising from the advisory opinion. But today we want to focus a bit on the stories behind the scenes, particularly about activism and the people who did a lot of the hard work behind the scenes to make sure that that day came to light, and we, at least those of us on the crusading side, felt really proud and happy that we could witness such a day. And so for our webinar today, we have two very special people to me, and it's also, I guess, a proud moment for me because it's an all-women's webinar. And that's a big one. Yes, it's a big one for me. And so without wasting any more time, I'd like to invite Ms. Samira Ben Ali, who is a passionate climate justice advocate committed to amplifying the voices of frontline communities and youth in global climate processes. Samira, I'd like you to introduce yourself and take it away from here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction also. So as Enam mentioned, my name is Samira Ben Ali. I'm from an island that is called Mayotte. It's just next to Madagascar. And from there, I've been able to really grow up in a beautiful environment, which has made me extremely aware of its degradation. And since young, I then decided to go towards studies that would allow me to protect that environment. And for me, that answer was through law. And I did international environmental law back in Aix-Marseille University in the south of France. And throughout my study journey, before I was doing international environmental law, I did a bit of political science. I met this beautiful group of students that is called Pacific Islands Students Fighting Climate Change, who came to me with this idea of from other islands, where they mentioned that they wanted to go to the highest court in the world and they wanted to ask climate justice from them. And at that time, like many people, I was impressed by the boldness. Yeah, I will start it here and I will stop it here, and then we can take it more into discussion later on with the questions.
Yeah, but you have a bit of time. You have I understand you're going to have to drop off the call a little earlier than planned. So how about you just tell us about that experience and how it was like from the beginning up until the time when we finally got the advisory opinion. And then perhaps we can do some questions before you drop off to do some other important things.
Yes.
How about that? Great.
So I was saying, I met this amazing set of students that came from the Pacific. Some of them came from Vanuatu, some of them came from Fiji, some of them came from Samoa, and they were telling me about the struggles that they were facing with their own islands. They were telling me about rising sea levels, the risk of seeing their land disappear, their culture disappear with it. They were telling me about extreme weather events year after year, where after a year of trying to rebuild, everything was being destroyed overnight because of an event that was amplified by climate change. They were telling me about crop failure, and I could relate a lot to those stories. And to me, when they told me about this idea of going to the highest court in the world, of going to the International Court of Justice, and trying to make this a journey about the people, it resonated a lot. And that's how I got involved back in 2021 when we didn't really have much at the time. We just had Vanuatu who had agreed to support us throughout this journey and to be the state that will be the front leader to take this forward. And what we needed at the time, when I just started to join the campaign, was to have a resolution. We had decided to take a route where we wanted to have a resolution voted at the UN General Assembly, and we needed at the time 94 states to agree to vote for a resolution that would have this advisory opinion, not decided for sure, not accepted for sure by the court, but at least it would be put on the table, which was an amazing first step. We were only a few students. We didn't know, we were not from 94 countries, and we didn't know 94 set of countries. But thankfully, thanks to Vanuatu in particular, we're able to meet some officials and talk with them. We did we tried as much as possible to recruit young people from across the world. We built fronts. For example, we had an African front, we had a European front, an Asian front, a Latin American front, trying to go toward those states who we knew had a lot at stake and that were often who felt often left out of the conversation, or at least when it comes to voting for a resolution or having real progress being made, they felt like they were being unheard. And so we tried to go to them and tell them this is a beautiful platform where if this resolution is voted and accepted, then you'll have an opportunity to go to this court and tell them about what struggle you're facing and how that can be then reflected into the law. So that was some of the challenges that we're facing. We got involved into the COP process really early on, not to really follow the conversation around COP, even if we follow them, but because it was a beautiful platform for us to meet. In 2 weeks, we had almost all of the states in one place meeting for sure. All of the negotiators were there. All the people that we knew that needed, almost we knew that we needed to have on board, we could meet for 2 weeks. So from 2021 until 2024, 2025, also this year we'll be going back to COP. We're going to the conversation, we're going to COP with the intention of meeting people, of trying to see if we could have them on board, trying to get contacts. And that's how we started from there to build our bit of our partners, profiles and partners files. And we were able to reach out to several countries, tell them about what an advisory opinion is, because a lot of them didn't really know what it was, what effect it could have. We also built civil society connections that were extremely important in trying to, as much as possible, in as many forums as possible, talk about this advisory opinion, what it is, and what it could bring to the table. So that's where the first moment where I really got involved and how the process worked for us as young people trying to get into that space of policymaking, and we're only students, so it was a bit sometimes complicated. There were some times that were a bit difficult, especially at the beginnings, because as you may already know, back in 2011, there was a first attempt for an advisory opinion on climate change that was made by the state of Palau, which resulted in a failure. And from there, we met a lot of lawyers and some practitioners who told us that this was something that was definitely going to fail. This court will never accept this. States will never vote for this. Why would they decide to be put in front of the law in regards to that? Or even if we go there and we have the resolution for the UNGA, then maybe it will not lead to anything. So those moments were a bit hard to accept, to see that people were so easy to cast an idea that could have a potential to do something interesting. And however, we call ourselves stubborn optimists, so we never really gave up, even if people were telling us that this was too big to be true. We really were at a point where we felt like if we are not able to really touch upon all of the other processes, we need to be able to go into all of the ideas possible to make sure that we are resolving this global crisis that is ours to face. This is our future that we're talking about. So we can't stop at a few people telling us this is an impossible idea. And yeah, from there, we're able to just reach out to as many people as possible. We have started to make our contact with state. And actually, before the vote back in 2023 of the resolution, we felt pretty confident going forward. We knew that somehow we didn't expect, because the vote happened and it was a consensus vote. State voted for it, for the ICJ to pick it up. But we were like, oh, maybe it's not going to be a consensus or anything like that, but at least we'll have like those 93, those 94 vote that we need to have. We're going to have them pretty sure, because we had so many workshops with states, so many discussion, bilateral discussion throughout the years that it felt, we never know, but it felt somehow secured in that sense. But however, when it happened and we saw that it was a consensus vote, we were just blown away. This was bigger than what we thought it was going to be. And it really showed us, oh, actually, this is not something that we need to cast. This is really a momentum. People feel the need to have something shift, to have this thing happen where we can all move forward the discussion out of the political willingness to do something. And that really re-energized us. And I remember us going to the next COP, the one in 2024, with like this renewed resolution of not only for COP, but even before that, okay, now we have the states who are going to participate, hopefully, to this process. The ICJ has accepted to move forward with this process, and we need to now have states to have state make really powerful written statements. And then we needed to have them make really powerful comments on each other. And then finally, we needed to have them when all eyes will be on them, when all eyes will look at the ICG in December 2024 for 2 weeks. And Madame Voigt was part of was part of that on the last day, I remember. We need to make sure that the statement are as strong as possible, that they are based on the narrative of people who can then pick it up and go to their own government and ask for more. And we needed to make sure that people really anchor the notion that we cannot shy away now from our obligations anymore. So those were kind of like the elements of that work, and at the same time trying to juggle finishing law school, obviously, which is another hurdle in of itself, as I guess you can imagine. But yes, we just kept going and tried as much as possible. And I think that at every step of this process, we were blown away by the level of participation, the level of willingness of states to get, but not only state, even civil society, to get forward with this, because I feel like people could see the potential in it, whether it was the level of participation for the written statement or during the oral statements that were really historic. For the most of the word of every kind of journal that we saw were saying the same thing, that this was a historic amount of participation and that there was a really shift happening. And from there on, again, we were able to, after we got the hearings, which were extremely, I was there for the 2 weeks, and I was really moved every day when I was able to participate. And during those hearings, I think that one thing that I want to point out is that we try to make sure as much as possible to make them accessible to people who don't know the process and want to pick it up. And we, for example, made sure to have daily debriefs where we had the team of lawyers stuck in a room for 2 weeks and trying to summarize what was being said in the courts in a matter of few pages that we then sent out to people and journalists so that they can relay it around the world. And I think that this actually made a bit of an impact. At least we had really positive feedback from it, of people that felt like they understood what was happening and what were the stakes in regards to matter related to human rights. People did sometimes don't really understand how human rights can be related to climate change and what was being the position of certain states. And in matters of also, for example, private actors, what are the states saying in regards to private actors? So we had like a wide range of discussion topics that were then synthesized and shared with the general public. And from there on, after the hearings were finished, you would think that it will be over for us and we'll just, sit aside and trying to rest a bit and wait for the decision to happen, whatever that means. But the idea was that no, actually, we have a short amount of time where we knew that some of the judges were gonna meet, and we wanted to make sure that as much as possible, and we did that also throughout the years of campaigning that we had, that they knew that people were really behind this opinion and that it started from the ground and that people were following, that they were watching the court. And we knew that the judges are humans and that if we show them lived reality of people, they could emphasize with them. So we sent them letters, we sent them videos that we made with local indigenous people, for example, being impacted by climate change. What did that mean for them? And throughout the journey, also, we had this documentary filmmaker that follow us throughout the process. So we also sent that. And we know that not only the judge saw them, but some of the staff of the court who are part, maybe sometime of the drafting team, we don't really know, but some of the staff who knew those elements of, human nature, deep things that connect us all together. They saw all of those letters, videos, statements from people around the world sharing all similar stories. And I think that that also made a big difference in how this opinion turned out, because people knew that there were heavy expectation related to it. And then we decided to focus on the narrative. We didn't know what was going to come out in July. We didn't know when it was going to come out. We didn't know what was going to come out, but we wanted to make sure but we knew that this moment was historic and we wanted that to be reflected in all of the conversations that will spark from there. So we try to, as much as possible on the background, to plan for different scenarios and how we would respond publicly or not. And actually, the scenario that we had right now was the best scenario that we could have imagined in terms of the content. So that is something that was quite big for us. We only had 2 weeks when we received the notice telling us, okay, now on the 23rd of July, the advisory opinion is going to come out. So please be there if you can. So yeah, we try to gather as many people as possible again on the ground in the short span of 2 weeks. Try to get in touch with as many journalists as possible for them to be able to share this news globally. And try to also discuss with as many young people as possible to tell them to actually sit down, because this is going to be live and you can watch it, and you can, from there, you know how the highest court in the world feel about climate change and how this is going to have ramification in all of climate law. And also, depending on what we do with this, it can have ramification on all other platform of conversation that we have. I talked about COP, but maybe we can also talk about climate COP, but we can also talk about biodiversity COP. We saw some people that were discussing who also brought the ICJAO to the plastic pollution conversation that were happening recently in Geneva. We also know that maybe some of that will be mentioned in other more informal settings. For example, right now I'm in a forum that is called the European Forum ALBAC, and we also talk about the advisory opinion and people know about it. So I think that this shows how much civil society puts work into shaping the public narrative and shaping the importance of this opinion. And I think that for us and many other young people who have followed or not this opinion, this means the world to us, or at least for me, it means hope. I think that the court, by deciding by consensus to give us such a strong opinion, has really shown us that they understood the matter at hand, and the vitality of making sure that whether it's through international human rights law, customary international law, that states have obligations to mitigate, to adapt, to cooperate together, to prevent what is happening right now, to stop things from going forward, and also that they must be held accountable when things go too far. And that means sometimes that they need to cease wrongful acts, that they must not repeat them, and that they also must repair when they have caused harm. And that it is important for state to be able to hold other states accountable also. So I think that for me, at least, and I'm speaking also for my colleagues, I'm sure, this felt almost unreal sometime listening to the 1 hour and more of delivering of this advisor opinion, because it felt so good to have what should be normal be said. It felt really like we finally were being heard, and all of those years meant something at the end of the day. And now we have the work of picking it up and making sure that it's implemented. But that is maybe a conversation for questions or, but yeah, so that is globally how this campaign at least felt for me, and really shortened and really made it look easier than what it was, for sure. But that was the gist of it.
Well, thank you. It's really inspiring. I wish we could hear more, but since you have to drop off, Professor, if you don't mind, if we can engage Samira for about 15 minutes before you come in with your little short talk to us about the journey of the IUCN and other people in the legal space regarding what was done towards the advisory opinion. But Samira, I should just read, if you take a little read of the opinion, you'll see that the ICJ put an emphasis on 1.5 as the temperature goal. And I thought that was, spot on for the court, but I would like to hear what that means for you and for the other climate activists, especially those from very vulnerable island nations, what that meant for them, that the court didn't say 2 degrees, which is what Paris says in part, but rather rested on 1.5 as the temperature goal, which states are supposed to meet with their commitments. Yeah.
I think that we felt a lot of relief, especially because going to the different climate policy stages that we need to be in, we feel like there is this element of bit of despair sometime in the air, and from that element of despair, people saying it's impossible now to do 1.5, they just want to abandon that goal, when actually that goal means everything for a lot of people around the world. It means the difference between having your home or not. So it felt good, but in the same time, it also felt kind of rational, because the other advisory opinion were also mentioning 1.5, whether it's the Inter-American Court one, the ITLOS one, 1.5 was also mentioned as something that should be one of the line that we do not cross if we actually want to be in a livable planet. So I think it would have been a bit strange for the court not to follow that, especially because also many civil society and scientists are saying that, we should not go beyond that. So it was a bit of a relief, but also it felt like it was necessary. So I think that from there, we're going to be able to lead on that, at least for COP, saying that there's some certain threshold that we should not cross, and certain discourses that should be lifted out of the conversation when it comes to climate change.
I want to take you back to what you said about meeting heads of state and other government officials at big events like the COPs. And I'm wondering how you and other student activists navigated the very interesting world of diplomacy in such thorough. So can you throw some light on that?
Mhm. I think that we fake it until we make it, huh? No, but really. And, no, but really at the beginning, we're just students and I didn't personally, I didn't know anything about those forums. I didn't come from a background where this was like, I used to have those kind of people every day, or I'm from like a village in Mayotte, a small village. So this is like not something that I'm used to at all. But I was just kind of like thrown away into that saying like, oh, you need to go and talk to this person and to this person and hand them the handbook that we had created. And it was about what we wanted to have out of the advisor opinion and get the contact. And you just go and you try to be as bold as possible. And also, it was kind of hard on a personal level because I'm an introvert. So those kind of things for me are extremely hard. This is really out of my comfort zone. But yeah, you need to be able to be a diplomat. You need to behave like a diplomat until you become one. So, so I guess that you just look and learn from there. Um, so yeah, I was just trying my best not to be awkward and share to people how important that was. And from there, you take it forward, you know. But yeah, that was basically that.
Fake it till you make it, you say.
Exactly. It has helped me a lot.
But I also can't help but notice or think, even imagine how much, apart from the energy and time and effort you put into this, how much money must have gone into doing this. And I wonder how you and the other activists have managed to raise all the funding that must have been necessary to travel to print these handouts out and go places and talk to people until they heard you. How did you manage that?
Oh, I still don't know. It was a bit day by day, you know. I think at the beginning, we really had nothing to show for ourselves. We didn't have money, but sometimes we'll talk to university. I remember I when I did my political science studies, I was part of the university that is called Sciences Po Rennes in the Caen campus, and I did an internship in what I was called the Norman Teacher for Peace, that was related to the University of Caen. And from there, we just asked them, okay, we created this handbook that is on our website. Can we print it? And yeah, people are willing to help, and they were also lawyers, so they knew of this advisory opinion and how ambitious this was and how important this could be. So they accepted to help us print a few of them. So at the beginning, it's just going toward people and asking from every angle of possible if we could receive help here and there. And with the campaign growing, and also we're all volunteers, so all of that what we're doing was time out of our studies that we're just dedicating to doing this campaign because we thought it was so important, at least at the beginning. Um, and yeah, from there we were able to get connected through the various conversations that we had, especially with other civil society organizations. We're asking them like, how do you get your money? Who do you go and talk to? And we learn about foundations and things like that. We write to people, try to get introduced to people, tell them about the campaign. And it's a bit hard to get funded when you work on the climate justice space, um, especially when you work on something like this. Like people can't really see it something tangible. We're not gonna go and plant 10,000 trees in a specific territory. We're telling them that we are trying to go to this court to talk about climate change, which has never been done before. We don't know if it's gonna be successful. We don't know if it's successful, how it's gonna be, how the advisory opinion is gonna look like. So there is a lot of if in this kind of campaign, generally in those kind of campaigns, when it comes to law, it takes so much time. It takes so much time also. So we're telling people like you need to trust us for a certain amount of year that we don't even know ourselves. So there was like a lot of thing parameters that were a bit against us. However, we made it day by day. Sometimes we'll find a founder that was willing to have 3 or 4 people go to GOP. Sometime another year it was 10, another year it was 3. So it's really day by day, keeping the connections going as much as possible, reaching out, making a list of all the foundation that we can email, and maybe if two answer and one give us, that's already one. So yeah, it was basically like that. And
I know you mentioned there were times when it felt rather discouraging. People told you along the way that this was not going to see the light of day. So I wonder, can you pick about maybe one or two moments that turned out to be, defining moments when you thought to yourself, this could really work. This could be the thing. Was it something that happened in the world? Was there something happening in the world which turned to, I guess, shifts the mood towards let's do this? Or I wonder how you felt about that, a defining moment where you felt this is the moment where I feel like things are going to move the way we have been planning.
I think that for me personally, it was meeting because we're all working online from across the world, but we are able to meet back in Dubai 2 years ago, with a lot of our colleagues that I've never met before for the first time. And that was for me a defining moment. I was like, look at those people from across the world caring about the same thing. They're so brilliant, they're so dedicated. And I understood from there that it was impossible that we do not at least achieve a little bit of something from there. And there, it was mostly about the meetings that I had with people. I also met, for example, the former UN Special Rapporteur David Boyd at some point, and he really believed in this advisory opinion, and also in the young people that were behind it. And those kind of like meetings of people who are people that I look up to and that were willing to take this forward to keep the conversation going were what was extremely reassuring to me. And obviously, starting the moment where we had the resolution vote, to me, I was the ball is gonna roll and it's gonna achieve its final destination from there. I was pretty confident from there.
I know your time is coming up very quickly now. Would you have any advice for, I guess, young activists, whether in the climate space or in another, related space, in the environmental space, especially? Any advice from your experience, which you think might be useful for them as they carry on with their own activism?
I remember after the delivery was done and I was still on the high, I had a conversation with a friend that is not really related to this space, but he still was really interested in the advisory opinion process. And I was telling him really strongly, don't trust people who tell you this is too big, this is too big of an idea, this is too crazy of an idea. If you have something that you truly believe in, just go for it and give it your 100%. But yeah, so don't listen to dissident voices on no, that are going to try to stop you because the system worked this way and that's the way it has worked all the time, which is not true, by the way. So if you feel like you want to make change and that you have intention and capacity to give, and you have an idea that could be for some people crazy, just go for it. Even if you don't have money, even if you're alone at the beginning, um, this is something that you can learn throughout the journey. So yeah, take all of the crazy idea and put them in the forefront.
Oh, sorry. This might be the last one to you. Beyond the advisory opinion, do you think there's anything else that inspires hope, especially for those of us in the climate fight?
This one is a bit hard for me right now because the advisory opinion gave me a lot of words. I think that we all know of the state of the world right now. Things seem to be shifting to places where we had drawn hard lines, and now it seemed like they're being crossed everywhere. So it's a bit hard for me to say. At least I know that the advisory opinion has shown me that even on the biggest platform, even at the biggest court, change can happen. So I'm going off of that, and I'm also find hope in interaction with daily actions of campaigning that I'm doing. So I think that acting upon the problem that we see at hand is one of the biggest help that you can do to yourself.
Great. I know I said that was the last question, but I see one question in the question box, and I think that I should put it to you. It says, from your point of view and experience working in this space, where do you believe the most meaningful and lasting impact is truly made? Is it in the level of technology innovation or policy or behavioral change in the communities, and why? I know it's a loaded question, but give it a go.
Thank you for that question. To me, it's not an easy question to answer because I don't think that there is one pathway for change. Society is not something that is really binary or really easy. You do this and then you're gonna absolutely have that. So it's it's all of those actions set together that are gonna make a lasting change. However, because I'm a policymaker and lawyer, I think that if we have a strong institution to back things up, then we have an extremely good start. And if we're able to, with those institutions, to set our hard lines, to also be able to hold people accountable, then we have a really good start. I think that you can have all of the willingness in the world to work locally and to build all of the movements in the world, but if those movements are being destroyed by our policies or are being let down by our institution, then that can withhold the change that need to happen within society. So yeah, I'll say that for now.
Thank you so much, Samira. I think you have about 15 more minutes, so please stay with us while I introduce the next panelists for this webinar. Professor Dr. Christina Voigt is a leading international expert in environmental law, climate governance, and sustainability. She's a professor of law at the University of Oslo, Norway, where she has taught and researched in the fields of public international law, climate change law, and environmental governance for more than a decade. Now she serves as the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law and is also co-chair of the Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee, where she plays a key role in advancing the effectiveness and credibility of international climate law. Professor Voigt has held leadership roles within WCEL, Climate Change Specialist Group, and she has also previously advised Norway's Ministry of the Environment through its International Climate and Forest Initiative. And I need not tell you, her extensive experience and scholarship have established her as one of the most respected voices in global environmental law, dedicated to ensuring strong legal frameworks for climate action, biodiversity protection, and sustainability. Professor Voigt, it's my pleasure to meet you and to give you the floor. Please tell us about that experience also, behind the scenes towards the ICJ advisory opinion.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. I think I need to write this down to have it, to use it in different contexts. That was amazing. But first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here today. Not so much to talk, but to listen, because it was an immense privilege to be able to sit here and listen to Samira. I've heard, of course, bits and pieces of the entire journey, and then I've seen it, and I've met with some of the students in the course of the last several years. But having you, Samira, showing the entire journey and your personal involvement, your personal ups and downs, as well as of the entire group of the World Youth Movement for climate justice is so impressive. And I'm almost missing words, but it's been a privilege just to listen to you. So thank you so much for sharing this with everyone listening here today. And I really hope that the documentary that is being done is going to become an Oscar-winning movie that the whole world is going to see and spread the word. So I do want to express also personally my deepest gratitude and respect to everyone of the youth team who started this, went through this entire process, and stood behind it with that level of resilience and stubbornness, as you called it, and power and courage. I think this is a singular story that the world needs to know and got to know, and I'm full of respect for everyone in this endeavor. I followed personally climate law for unfortunately more than a decade. It's probably more than 2.5 decades by now. Time flies, and I followed it from many different perspectives, from academia, from policy development, from negotiations, from advocacy, and so forth. And seeing this important step now being taken, and as Samira called it, having in a legal framing what needed to be done and what is so obvious is absolutely stunning, and also I think for everyone working in this field, a really, really important step forward. But you ask about the IUCN's journey in this, and that's really an interesting one, because the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, is an international organization, but of a very special kind, because it does have member states, almost 100 member states, but it also has over 1,400 NGOs as members. So it's a hybrid organization, and in that sense, it was the only one before the court who was not just representative of state voices, but also of civil society voices. And I think that kind of set us a little bit apart from everyone else, because all the others were either states, 98 states, or international organizations who comprised completely of states. So IUCN was a bit of a different case in the proceedings, but I think this is also why the court wanted us there. And at least that's what I hope was the case and tend to believe. IUCN has been involved in advisory opinions previously. We appeared before the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea in its previous advisory opinions, and in the climate change advisory opinion process as well as before the Inter-American Court on Human Rights in both of its advisory proceedings. But the IUCN had never been in front of the ICJ, so that was completely new. And as you know, in order for an organization to be able to appear before the court, you have to ask to be authorized and then get this authorization. And not everybody got it, but I guess the court saw some value in having IUCN's, I think, both scientific background, scientific knowledge combined with the legal knowledge presented before it, and saw it helpful in the proceedings. We were also the first one to ask to be authorized, so that was an enjoyable moment when the court did so and went forward with its authorization. Now, IUCN is huge. It's an old organization, was established in 1925. So within that huge organization, it did fall upon the World Commission on Environmental Law, which I chair, as you mentioned, to represent IUCN in these proceedings, to prepare the written statements, to prepare the oral statements, to hold the oral statements, and be legal counsel. And that was a challenging task because WCL, the World Commission on Environmental Law itself, has many members. We are about 1,500 volunteer experts from all over the world who comprise the commission. So we had to find a structure of how to move this work forward. We have a specialist group on climate change law, which is co-chaired by two climate change experts, and it fell upon Dr. Francesco Sindico, Professor Dr. Francesco Sindico, to navigate the internal proceedings. And we established a core group to prepare the core legal arguments, and then we had an advisory group within the entire universe of IUCN and beyond to check whether our arguments aligned with the general policies and views and positions of the union. And that was a massive amount of work. But I think in our way to approach the questions that were asked to the ICJ and how to answer them, we could align with so many different, we were not bound by one single particular state party's view, right? We could really analyze the law in its breadth and depth and put forward something that we hope would be of value to the court. And we see now that the court's opinion, we were in many points spot on. I mean, whether the court followed our input or not, that is something we cannot analyze, but we see that we got it right on many of the points that we included. So it was a long and difficult journey, but it was of course a very fascinating one, because as Samira said, I mean, these questions are of fundamental importance, and standing in front of the court, standing in front of the judges and speaking on behalf or pleading on behalf of a common good for now and for future generations is an experience that is really unparalleled, I think, in any lawyer's international lawyer's career. That only is a once in a lifetime moment, because these opportunities don't happen that many, not that often. But it was also a moment where we really felt, all of us, the responsibilities on our shoulders, right? As lawyers in this field, we have to live up to provide the best arguments, the sound legal arguments, based on sound science, to the court, to be credible, to be authentic in our argumentation. And we see what we got out of it, all of it. I think Samira is very right to call it a historic opinion, not just because of the number of participating states and international organizations, but also because it is unanimous. The entire court, the entire bench stands behind it. That doesn't happen so very often with the ICJ. It was the same, by the way, with ITLOS, which shows that the judges very well understand the role the law plays, international law, but also domestically, in addressing climate change. But I find very telling the very last paragraph in the advisory opinion, which gives perhaps a little bit insight in how the judges felt when they engaged in their deliberations on the opinion, because they say they hope that they were able to contribute by answering the questions put before to the development of international law and governance in this field. But ultimately, international law is limited, because we have to look across the entire engagement of human knowledge, human wisdom, whether that's politics, that's economics, that's education, that's the philosophy, because it is an all on hands all hands on board challenge, and law can only provide part of the solution, but it has to act in interaction with so many other aspects of human endeavor and hopefully ingenuity. But the court also pointed very critically to the fact that this is an existential problem to humanity, to our planet and to its people, and that it is self-inflicted, right? But in that self-infliction perhaps lies also a hope that we can, by understanding what the court said, move forward in a better way and hopefully address that self-inflicted problem in a constructive way forward. But it would not have happened without the impressive engagement of the World Youth for Climate Justice. So all thanks to you, Samira, and all your colleagues.
Yes, indeed. I think we all have such great pride for you and your colleagues. It can't be said enough what you've done and what you've achieved simply by stepping up. And so if we haven't said it already, congratulations to you and all the others who you've worked with. Prof, were you there at the ICJ for the reading of the judgment?
Yes, I was there.
What was the mood like in the room? What was like in the room?
A little bit like Samira said, it was almost 2 hours. I didn't, and I had the impression nobody else really knew what the court was gonna say. And it was 2 hours of almost disbelief. Like every single sentence was like tick, tick, tick boxes. Like really, that is important. That's right. That is accurate. Absolutely perfect. Spot on. There was a lot, like Samira said, there was a lot of, when it became clear that it will go to the ICJ and after the hearings, there were still voices saying, yeah, just wait until the opinion comes out and you will see it just will not be, it will be very traditional and perhaps not very progressive. But it's not, right? None of this came true. It's an incredibly strong, clear and very precise and diligent advisory opinion. And sitting there, because you asked me, was absolutely amazing. But you could also hear the reaction by others in the room, right? There were gasps, there were people who could just not hold their excitement anymore. It's like, really? And that was really telling for the level of enthusiasm and gratefulness, I think, that immediately spread out in the room throughout those almost 2 hours of reading.
Thank you. I know a lot has been said about the fact that it's an advisory opinion. It's merely advisory. It holds very little weight in terms of what it can do in legal terms. But what do you think the ripple effect of this advisory opinion might be for climate change and also for other global environmental problems? For example, this one about plastics, which we're grappling with at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that many things need to be said here. First, this idea that advisory opinions aren't legally binding and therefore it's like nice to have but don't really mean much is completely wrong. And I think it's really important to delve a little bit deeper why they matter. Well, first of all, this is not a contentious proceedings. All right, it was not a judgment that said you state A are right and you state B are wrong. Because judgments in contentious proceedings only bind the two parties to a case. Advisory opinions are authoritative statements on the status of legal obligations given by the authoritative organs. And in this case, it's the highest judicial organ of the UN system. Yes, it is per se not binding, but the legal obligations are. Right? The court clarified what the legal obligations are, and they are binding. They are binding basically on everyone, or Paris Agreement and the UN climate treaties to the parties, but it also made profound statements on customary international law. But even more, as Samira explained, The request came from the UN General Assembly, and it came from a resolution that was adopted by consensus, right? There was not a single state that voted against it. Some abstained, but it was adopted by consensus. So having the United Nations General Assembly requesting an advisory opinion now also has to deal with what it got back from the court, right? It asked for something, now it got it, and now the United Nations General Assembly has to do something with it. And that's something that we're going to see, hopefully, playing in at the next meeting in September in New York. And the opinion was unanimous, right? The judges were unanimously behind the findings, as I already said. That also carries significant normative weight, that the clarifications of international law came from a united court at the highest UN level. And I think that will have significant repercussions on, hopefully also on the diplomatic processes in the COP, but also most importantly domestically, right? I can already see that some domestic climate cases are referring to to the ICJ opinion already now, like even within that 1 month. And I think that will continue, that we will see references to what came from The Hague will be taken up and will inspire domestic law making, but also domestic court decisions. And hopefully lead to changes in the legal system, lead to changes in regulatory frameworks and laws, as it should be, and as the court pointed to, that states have a regulatory due diligence obligation of the highest magnitude, and that means revising a lot of the legal framework in existence, in particular with regard to private actors.
Yeah, and I'll take you back to the comment you made about a lot of concerns that this would be a traditional, advisory opinion where things would be said a certain way. There wouldn't be too much, let's say, activism from the bench. But having read the advisory opinion, do you see any moments where perhaps some boldness and judicial activism came to light?
I would say judicial courage, but not activism. I think the court was very careful in applying the methodologies that it has at its disposal. It did not cross any lines to being vulnerable for claims of judicial activism, but it was bold, right? It used the means, the legal tools at its disposal and applied them. It did read the text of the Paris Agreement. It did interpret the treaties in the light of the object and purpose of the climate treaties. It did use international rules and standards to inform the legal obligations of due diligence across the entire field of international law. So I think in terms of methodology and what the legal tools are that we would expect that court to deploy, it did stick to the traditional tools, but it did so boldly and went further and cut through a number of ambiguities that existed in the treaties as well as in custom and clarified it. And I think that required that courage that we've seen. But I said, as I would be careful calling it judicial activism, but courage.
Definitely courage. I would say also, especially also that it was unanimous and that there weren't any dissenting opinions. A couple of declarations and separate opinions, but those only went to, I guess, galvanize the position and make it even more concrete. I'd like to ask you a question just because I also teach international law and I also research climate. How do you think this advisory opinion might shape discussions in the classroom, especially concerning climate and environmental law more generally?
First of all, I hope it inspires optimism, right? We need optimism. It's very easy, especially for younger people, to get frustrated. You just have to look at the news, you have to look at the scientific findings that are worse for every time we get a new report, and it's not easy to be a young person growing up into a world where you already know that your future will look distinctly different from the one that we experience or our parents. So I think having this example of the power of young people, the power of law, going through legitimate channels, but ending up at the highest court in the world, hopefully inspires optimism and hope. And I can see this in my classes. Students find this, I had just today, I had a 2-hour session here at the University of Oslo, and students seem to be genuinely interested and inspired by what's happening, and looking more and more into the role of law, right? We've discussed climate change for such a long time in terms of science and diplomacy and policy and politics, but now it's squarely anchored in the field of law, and that might be its the best chance and the best moment to see effective action coming forward.
I suppose also for the COP that is on the horizon in a couple of months, perhaps your thoughts about how that advisory opinion is taken at that gathering as well.
Yeah, I think it will need again mobilization of those forces that Samira described. Things do not happen on its own in a COP, right? It's going to be the 30th COP, like 30 years of COPs, and there are very path-dependent positions that can be heard. So it will need someone or a coalition of states to bring in what the ICJ said in the context of the negotiations, because otherwise states will just continue in their normal I wouldn't call it rat race, but it's the same positions that we've heard for such a long time. So this will require voices to be heard and to be mobilized to take up this issue and bring the advisory opinion into the COP discussions, and maybe even to the attention of the negotiators. I'm not sure everybody has really diligently read what came from The Hague, but this is still an uphill battle, and nothing should or could be taken for granted. It will still need a lot of energy and a lot of dedication to kind of bring the main points, in particular on the Paris Agreement. I think these are elements that have been absent from the climate discussions, like the status of the NDC, the legal obligation of conduct to have NDCs at the highest possible ambition, the legal obligation of conduct to actually implement and achieve your NDC, have domestic measures. These were things that are in the Paris Agreement, but not necessarily have been discussed in the COPs since, except for maybe the mitigation work program, but that didn't go so far. So I think that still needs a lot of work, and not just this COP. There will also be the next one and the next one, where what came out of Hague will be relevant.
Well, thank you for that. Perhaps one last question, just because you've dealt with the ICJ process, I imagine, in several capacities outside of the IUCN, and I'm wondering what has, beyond everything you've said, what has kind of struck you most about how the court approached this particular thing of climate change? Again, I'd say, is it just about the fact that it's an emergency now, we can't avoid it anymore? Was it something in particular that you think is striking about this particular advisory opinion?
What struck me from the moment I heard the president reading and then finally reading the text myself is how diligent the court and how serious the court took the questions put to it, how serious it took the climate science presented by the IPCC. There was not a question, not a speck of doubt about climate change being serious, being man-made, nothing. It took that so seriously and then diligently applied the law to the facts. I think that deeply impressed me to have the judges putting their collective profession and legal wisdom behind answering the two questions that came from the General Assembly, and then thereby really being part of the discussion, being part of the solution. And I think you could really feel this and see it, and maybe perhaps in that final paragraphs, that the judges wanted to be part of it, right? They wanted to show and prove that law is an absolutely indispensable tool in the global response to climate change, and they gave us really clear guidance of how to understand it and then also how to apply it.
Thank you. There's one question for you, and perhaps that might be the closing question. While the ICJ's assertion reinforces the urgency of binding states' climate obligations, this point is also again about the fact that it's non-binding in practice. How can the global community, especially vulnerable nations, leverage this advisory opinion to push for enforceable legal frameworks that go beyond moral authority and ensure accountability for climate inaction?
Yeah. Many ways, right? As I said, there can be diplomatic ways, there can be bilateral, regional ways to look into it. From what the court said, for example, on the elements of legal responsibility, state responsibility for climate damages in terms of attribution of harm, causation of harm, where the court said in general that applies, but it leaves it to the decision on a case-by-case basis, right? In concreto, indicates in a way that there will be, or there should be, or there may be further steps, legal steps taken, and not as the only solution, but again as part of the solution. Because if you apply what the court now said in a state-to-state claim, then it will become, of course, more concrete in the context of specific circumstances, but it will also be then directly binding on the state or states in question. I'm not saying you should go to court, but I think the ICJ clearly opened that path and kind of indicated the expectation that this may happen in order to give more detail to some of the more open questions that it still left out to answer specifically in its advisory opinion. But in addition to exploring that legal pathway, I think there is much else that can and needs and should to be done in terms of keeping the diplomatic avenue open and going forward. I think it's a global crisis which needs a multilateral solution, and bilateral contentious cases may have to be the last resort.
All right, our time is almost about up now, and I would like to say a very big thank you to Professor Dr. Christina Voigt. It's been said many times that the wheels of justice grind really slowly, and perhaps for climate change, maybe not, but it has been amazing. As Professor Voigt, you've said, just in my own opinion, also how the young people from vulnerable nations and indeed across the world have led the charge, sometimes where their leaders have not particularly seen the seriousness of the situation. And perhaps even if the wheels grind slowly, they do grind after all, and eventually we get some justice, as we have gotten from this advisory opinion. Samira has had to drop off, but I would like to say a big thank you to her as well for sharing those insights. there's just so much to be taken from what she said. Prof. Voigt, a big thank you to you once again for sparing your time. I know you've been on so many of these webinars. I've been on a couple that you have been on, and I can only say thanks so much for sparing your time and your attention to be with us here to discuss these important things. And thank you to everyone who has joined this webinar. We hope that we can have so many of these other types of webinars where we discuss issues which affect sustainability and our collective interest in environmental issues. So thanks so much. And I wish you all the best. Good day, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you, Professor Voigt, and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.